Welcome, everybody. This is the DVMUG Zoom meeting. It's June 25th, 2024, and we have a special guest today, Jason Snell, with his annual report on WWDC. If you don't know, Jason has his website at Six Colors, among many other podcasts of numerous mention, which he can tell you about. Okay, Jason, take it away.
If I can remember. Yeah, so I was at Macworld magazine for a lot of years and then have been doing Six Colors for almost 10 years now and many podcasts as well. Um, no slides. I thought about it and then I realized I didn't want to make them and I just have notes and one of these days I'll go back to slides, but I don't think they're that interesting. Um, Also, I'll give you I'm going to talk about the WWDC announcements and how this is all going to work. And I am happy to answer your questions as well about if I know I'll try. I'll put it that way because there's a lot of stuff that we don't know about what Apple is planning in the next year. And then I will just because this is one of my local Mac user groups. What's the tidbit I can give? When Walnut Creek was a one-stoplight town, my dad in the late 60s and early 70s, my dad was an orthodontist in Walnut Creek, and that was his first practice. And I never lived in Walnut Creek. I grew up in Sonora, but for years my dad actually had a plane and he would fly from Sonora to Concord to Buchanan Field and then drive down to Walnut Creek. And I used to live in San Ramon. So I've been in the East Bay a lot, although now I'm in Marin County. So high over here from where it's cold. Um, but I got to go to Cupertino where it's warmer, good 15 degrees warmer than it ever is in Mill Valley. And be reminded that it's summertime and go to the developer conference. So I always like to say it's New Year's Day for Apple, the first day of the developer conference, because what Apple does is they make these announcements and they talk about the plans for the year, and that was never more true than this year because so much of what they announced had a very flexible time frame, and I suspect will still be rolling out up until the last week before WWDC 2025 because which is fine. I think Apple realized I think of it this way. If you had a feature that was almost ready to go, but it wasn't going to be quite ready for the fall, but you thought you could probably get there sort of like in November, the time was that feature got booted a year out. And they don't do that anymore. They have a plan to kind of roll things out throughout the year, and I think that that's perfectly good. So anyway, the big story, and I'm happy to answer your questions after I give you kind of the overview, was this thing called Apple Intelligence, which is Apple's take on AI functionality that has been, much talked about in the tech industry over the last few years. It's really kind of caught fire, and Apple felt it needed to respond and send a message that it's paying attention to this and it's on it. But before I even get to that, I'm going to give you the very briefest of overviews, which is how it works. So there are these machine learning models. They are it involves complex training on data at a very simple level. It's being able to say sort of like, this you're having a machine say, is this a thing? And you say no. Is this a thing? You say yes. You do that millions and millions of times, and you can train a model. It works a little bit more like how a human brain works. There's not millions of lines of code saying if this then that, if this then that, which is sort of how it's worked in the past. Instead, you basically create this training system and a feedback loop, and the systems kind of like emerge with knowledge or being able to judge things in a way that's very complicated, but is a lot more sophisticated than if you are writing individual lines of code saying if this then that. So it's got at certain tasks, it has a huge advantage by using things that are more human brain like in its abilities. It can go beyond what any more traditionally written computer program can do, which is great. Now, Apple, despite the narrative that I think Apple wanted to shift this year about not being paying attention to AI, that's actually not true. Apple has been on this for years. I think it's about 7 years now. Um, for a lot of this stuff. The Photos app has had machine learning based, or also word machine learning AI interchangeable concepts. Apple never called it AI before. They always called it machine learning because they felt like artificial intelligence kind of a loaded term, different meanings for different people. A lot of people think it means like HAL 9000 from 2001, A Space Odyssey, a computer that actually thinks. Other people use it. They want you to think that, but it doesn't actually work that way. Machine learning is probably more accurate. I'll use them interchangeably. They really are interchangeable in terms of what we're talking about here. So either way, Apple's been using this a long time. They added a feature to Photos a long time ago where when you added a photo to your photo library by taking a picture or importing it or whatever, it would be scanned by a machine learning model to detect what was in the photo so that you could later search for like cat. I used to use iView multimedia for all my photo library, and I would like tag images of who is in it, what person was in it, maybe a pet. And for years now, for I think 7, 8 years, Photos just does that automatically. And so not only does it recognize faces and you can say who those faces are, but it'll recognize, is there snow? Is there a mountain? Are there horses? Are there dogs? Is there a boat? It does all of that stuff. And that is sort of the power of machine learning, is that they can just apply these machine learning models to your photos and you don't have to tag them anymore. And then you can type in a search box, show me all the photos with boats, and it will show you some of the photos with boats and some things that aren't boats, because it's not a perfect technology, but it's still better than not having anything. So Apple also on its chip design side has been doing this for a long time. The neural engine, which is a what I think they call a neural processing unit now, but basically it is a way to do functions that are very popular in machine learning tasks to accelerate all of that. Apple's been building those into its Apple Silicon chips since I think it's 7 years ago on the iPhone, and they keep advancing it. It's in all modern Apple Silicon Macs and iPhones and iPads of recent vintage. So they've been doing this a lot. But in the last couple of years, AI has become super hyped. I would argue, honestly, we could debate whether it's overhyped or not. There are some people who would say AI is going to completely change the world. And in the last 2 years, the entire future trajectory of the technology industry has transformed forever. And there are other people who say it's all a bunch of hooey and it's all just hype and they're just trying to it's like everything was cryptocurrency and that fell apart, and now everything is AI and that'll fall apart and they'll try to sell us something else. Here's my personal opinion. I think that it is overhyped, but also has enormous potential to change technology. I think both of those things are true. I think they're overdoing it, but we should be aware at how game-changing this technology can be in certain areas. And I think, again, both of those things are true. I think it gets too much hype for what it is. I think people try to promote things that it can't do, but it can do an awful lot. So Apple felt the need strongly to show that it was on it. It said like, yeah, AI, yeah. We know we're on it. And they designed WWDC 2024 to do that. And I think they succeeded if you consider the coverage afterward and the stock performance and things like that, that everybody seems a little more reassured about what Apple is doing. And what Apple is doing is branding a lot of its new take on AI as Apple Intelligence. AI, they can call it something that isn't artificial intelligence and still feel good about it. And I want to be clear here. Some of what Apple announced that you may have heard about involved ChatGPT. And I'll talk about ChatGPT, which is one of these chatbots from OpenAI, in a little bit. But I want to be clear. Apple Intelligence is a name for features that use Apple's own software, services, machine learning models to perform tasks. Apple Intelligence has no other companies involved. Apple Intelligence is Apple's models on your device or on devices Apple has built that are in its cloud structure, which I'll talk about in a little bit. None of it is powered by ChatGPT or any other external model, not Google, not Facebook, none of them. It's all Apple. And I think a lot of people were misunderstanding the idea that it was OpenAI that was powering it. It's not true. I'd say the other big takeaway from Apple Intelligence as a concept is that Apple is building features to solve problems and trying to have results use your personal context, the information that's in the data on your personal device, which is something that a global chatbot that's just been that ate the world of information and now will respond to your questions can't know about you because that information is personal and it's on your own device. Some other notes about Apple Intelligence. Apple says it will debut this fall in iOS 18, iPadOS 18, and macOS Sequoia. I will say that some of it will debut this fall, some of it will debut this winter, some of it will debut next spring. It's going to be a long process before we see all the features that they announced. And a very specific and important, I would wager to a lot of you, compatibility note, which is these are about as strict a system requirement as we've seen in a long time from Apple for a brand new set of features in their operating systems. Apple Intelligence features will only run on Apple Silicon Macs. They'll only run on iPads with the M1 or later processor, and they'll only run on iPhones with the iPhone 15 Pro or better, which essentially means the iPhone 15 Pro or Pro Max and presumably all future iPhones released, but any other iPhone will not work with Apple Intelligence. Even the iPhone 15 sold last fall will not, that is still current, will not work. And the reason for that is mostly that these models take up an enormous amount of memory. They require a lot of memory, more memory than iPhones have had until the iPhone 15 Pro. So there's a really strict limit on Apple Intelligence features. There are some other machine learning features I'll mention later that will work with older hardware, but the AI stuff is this is cutting edge stuff, and they're pushing the hardware to the limit. So let me give you a summary of what goes into Apple Intelligence, at least thus far. There's a lot of summarizing of notifications, including message threads. So one of the features is going to be notification center is going to be able to say, here's what's been going on. Here's what people are talking about in messages. Here's that thread where 80 messages came in. Here's a summary of what's going on there, which I will love. I'm on a family chat thread that I have turned notifications off or chimes off, but 30 messages will queue up there, and I'd really like a summary of what's going on because I don't have time for that. New writing tools, and they'll be system-wide. A grammar checker that's system-wide. AI is really great at stuff like you should have put it like copy editing. Basically, I have used some AI-based grammar checkers, and they're getting really good. They're getting very good at saying you should put a comma there, and this word isn't the right, it's not the right tense and things like that. Just kind of remarkable. They will also have a tone checker, which is kind of wild to say. Like you could take their demo of that is you could take a business letter, you're applying for a job, you write something, or let's be clear, a 19-year-old writes a cover letter for a job and they don't know about business tone, and you can actually select it and say, make this more business-like, and it will change. It would be so, I can't wait to work with you. It's so awesome. I'm a huge fan. It'll turn into, I've really appreciated your career from afar, and I look forward to the possibility of working with you. That sort of thing where it's like, change the tone, bad tone, bad tone. Some of that will be in Apple Intelligence, and that again, that's any app that uses Apple's standard text frameworks, so system wide. Apple Mail, there's a smart reply feature that tries to like parse if a message is really utilitarian, how many people are coming, when are you going to be there. You can actually sort of like just click some buttons to give the answer and send it back. And a very clever summary, instead of showing the first few words of a message in the little summary underneath your email list, it will generate an actual summary of the contents of that email, which is way more useful. There's going to be a new focus mode that's driven by machine learning that's going to actually look at all of the things that have happened and that are going to happen, and it will decide whether that message is worth alerting you to. When you're in reduce interruptions, it's called focus mode. Bunch of changes in photos, including finally a cleanup tool to remove that person who walked behind you when you were taking that picture of your family on the beach. I don't know why it took them this long to do it. I don't know why it's part of Apple Intelligence. Other apps have had this for years. But here it is, along with some more natural language searching in photos, search in videos, which is very clever. So they're going to actually parse all the frames. So you can say, can you show me the moment in this clip when this happened? And it will actually be able to find that in a video clip. Let's see. A bunch of transcription features because AI is really good at transcription. So you can record audio in notes and it will generate a transcription and even a summary based on what it's recording. And you'll actually even be able to do that on a phone call. It'll give like a notification that you're recording the call, and it will transcribe and summarize your phone call. Programmers who write programs for Apple's platforms will find out code completion and a bunch of other assistant features in Xcode. So you literally be able to say, hit a key and say, what comes next, and it will have a pretty good job of what comes next. There's some image generation features. There's a thing called Genmoji, which basically will create things that look like emoji but aren't really, based on your requests. And then there's a thing called Image Playgrounds that will let you create things that you like. If you've ever seen AI images, it's a little like that, but they've tried to build an interface on top of it that's very Apple-like. Not my favorite feature, but it's there. And then the big one, I would say, which is a new Siri is coming at some point, unclear how quickly, that will have more of a conversational ability, understands how people talk, understands the context of your conversation, understands who you are based on the content on your device, will be able at some point next year to understand from what you're looking at on your device, what you're talking about. So you can actually be looking at an email from somebody and say, reply to him and say this, and it'll know who you're talking about because that person is in your email and it can see your screen because it's your device. And so it knows what's on its own screen. It will also be able to leverage the power of your apps. This is a thing that started with shortcuts and is really getting amped up now. It's a thing called app intents that allow app developers to take all the things that their app does and sort of offer them to the system as, I could do that. And then through a process that Apple is calling orchestration, Siri and Apple Intelligence will be able to interpret. Essentially, they'll interpret your command. You say, I want to do this. And you may not know like what app can do that, what app will do that, but the system knows. And so you can say, I want to do this. And the system will be like, oh yeah, well, I can take this thing from over here, run it through that app over there, then run it through this app over here, and then send it out using this other app. And it should be able, the dream is it should actually be able to do that, which would be amazing if they can pull that off. And then another thing about Siri that I thought I would mention, because it's pretty funny, and anybody here has possibly been tech support for members of your family who are less interested in technology. The new Siri will have read all of Apple's documentation and will answer questions about how do you do X, which is really interesting. Like, how do you do that? That instead of saying, well, you could go to the Tips app or you could read this on our website, it's like the Apple's new Siri knows all the documentation and will be able to pull up and say, oh, here's how I can solve your problem, which if that works, again, like the promise there is pretty tremendous. Before I stop for questions, I have one other note that's very important, which is where the processing happens, because this is very controversial when it comes to a lot of artificial intelligence stuff, because it's personal, often personal data that you're just sending to somebody's server somewhere, and what happens to it? What reassurances do you have that it's not being built to feed other models and things like that? A lot of what Apple Intelligence is going to do is going to happen on device. There's actually a model, a machine learning model on your device that takes your request and decides, is this a thing that I can do, or do I need to have powerful servers in the cloud do this for me? And it decides whether that's true. And if it is going off of your device, what personal data is going to go off the device in order to make that request work. So it's actually like machine models all the way down. There's a model to decide what model to use. But off device sounds scary. Wait a second. Personal information going off my device. What does that mean? Apple has built something that they're calling private cloud compute. It is a really interesting idea. They are basically in Apple's data centers, they are building servers using Apple hardware, including Apple processors, and it's encrypted, and there's no way to store information, and there's no way for Apple to see the information, and they've got a bunch of white papers about it, and they're going to make all the software available for security researchers to check. And the idea here is Apple is not interested in using your data for anything. They want to guarantee that it's going to be private. And so they've built, at great expense, I would imagine, a whole secure system, including servers based on chips that they control, and an operating system based on iOS to do a secure server that will take your request, and it anonymizes it. And they've done a lot. It's really quite impressive when you read what they've been doing. So your device will send something encrypted to that server. That server will decrypt it, run the machine learning model, send it back, and at that point it forgets everything that it's just done, and nobody can see it. And that's the goal, is that it's completely secure, because understandably a lot of people don't like the idea that you're going to send any private information to a remote server, but they feel like it's necessary because some of the stuff that Apple Intelligence needs to do requires power beyond whatever device you happen to be using today. So more about that to come, but it looks like Apple has made a really great effort to keep what does get sent to the cloud at a a very secure level beyond anything that anybody else is doing. So some of this stuff will be this fall, some of it will be later this year. Like I said, some of it's going to be next year. And I really think it's going to be, these features are just going to be rolled out every so often over the next few years. They'll keep on adding new features to Apple Intelligence. This is sort of the we're not quite yet, but this fall will be at the starting line for it. And I anticipate they'll be doing this a lot. So I'm going to stop there for a second. Do people have questions about Apple Intelligence? I will stop talking and try to answer your questions.
Angie, you got your hand up.
I do. Yes. One thing I'd advance I'd like with Siri is so when I by voice ask Siri a question when I'm driving my car, I would love if Siri speaks back instead of saying, here's some things I found on the web, which I can't look at when I'm driving my car, obviously.
So it's unclear. I mean, when you're in your car, you're using your phone, so it will work there, and it should be better at understanding you and understanding what you want. It should be better at getting that data. And for the data where it can't give you an answer, and I'll talk about this when we're done with this question part, it will have the option of saying, I can send that to like ChatGPT, and it might be able to give you an answer. But it'll ask, and it's off by default, but it'll ask if you want to turn it on. It'll ask every time it queries that. But the idea there is, there will be a fallback where it will go to another chatbot and it will give you a conversational answer back. So the idea ultimately is that Siri should be much more functional when you're having a conversation with it, when you can't look at a screen, like if you're driving. Hopefully for things like HomePods too, although I'm unclear how that will work unless the HomePod is going to talk to an iPhone, because the HomePods are certainly not capable of this kind of level of feature. So I hope my HomePods can like talk to my phone and use my phone for that part of it. We'll see about that. But in the car, it's not a problem because it is your phone.
So let me ask you one more question about what you were talking about right at the end there, where you were talking about the security of all of this information flow. Government security agencies must be in dread of this, because if it's totally secure and private, bad actors could be getting all this help from AI potentially to do bad stuff that the government can't in any way monitor, unless there are safeguards built into the system. Have you heard anything about them building in safeguards?
I'm sure there are guardrails there, but keep in mind what Apple's trying to do here is help you use your phone better, help you use your Mac better. So, at that point, if you were trying to do, I don't know what it would be. You're not going to be wanting to do something nefarious with your own personal data on your device anyway, probably. That sounds like something where Apple is going to say, I can't handle that. And you could go to ChatGPT if you wanted. But for this sort of thing, I don't think it's the same. I mean, first off, Apple does offer end-to-end encryption for almost everything that it does now, and I'm sure that the government agencies aren't happy about that either. But that's just the way it is because, either everybody's secure or nobody's secure. Those are really the only two options. But in this case, I don't think it's going to be super relevant to just making. These are all very temporary AI queries where you're sending a little bit of personal data and your question, and it's churning and then kicking you back an answer and immediately wiping out any trace of what was there.
Thanks.
Hey, Mike, you got your hand. You're up. Mike, got your hand up? Yeah. Are you waving at us or you have a question? We can't hear you. Are you muted?
You gotta unmute.
Yeah, you're muted. Unmute, Mike. Mike, if you got a question, there you go.
Yes. My question is, Jason, at the beginning of this, you were talking about the system requirements, that the iPads have to have an M1 chip or newer. Your phone has to be a 15 or something because it just takes so much memory that the current phones don't have it. I missed the part where what your Mac has to have. You said something about silicone.
It's Apple Silicon, M1, M2, M3. If it's Intel, it won't work.
Oh, okay.
So it actually works on more Macs than it does other hardware.
It does.
By far.
I caught Kenji's answer in the chat room, but I didn't understand it.
Yeah. So you've got to have an Apple. If it's a Mac, it's got to have the Apple Silicon processors in it, not the Intel processors for it to work.
So if it's going to take a memory, so is the memory like the standard 8 gigs of memory? Should people be buying more memory on their Macs?
I mean, it will work on 8 gigs of memory on the Mac, and I think that 8 gigs is what it's on the iPhone too.
Yeah.
There are some features like the Xcode stuff for developers that requires 16. I think most of this stuff they will try to fit into 8, but if I was buying, given where Apple is going with this, if I was buying a new Mac today, I would not skimp on the memory because these models eat memory. So yeah, I would.
Who else has their hand up? David, you have a hand up. Go.
Judith also was raising her physical hand.
Judith has been raising her hand.
An actual hand.
Physically, actual hand. Yeah. I'll
actual
refer to her first.
Judith.
You actually answered half my question because that was my question in terms of I understand how much memory AI takes. So, 16 minimum, but in terms of, so what would be the...
It's 8 minimum for most of it. The Xcode is, the developer stuff for programmers is 16.
Right, but you're saying now...
base is 8, yeah.
Yeah, but you're saying now, but what's coming?
Well, that's a good question. My guess... At some point they will probably introduce some features that require more memory, although the other thing they've got is the cloud, right? So they're not doing this today or this year. They told me, I asked, where different hardware could use local or in the cloud, depending on what their capabilities were. They're not doing that today. Every task, whether you're on a Mac Studio with an M2 Max chip or whether you're on an M1 MacBook Air, the tasks that are local are the same, and the tasks that are remote are the same. But in the long run, it's possible that they could introduce some features that will run locally on systems with faster chips or more memory, and will run remotely, which means they'll be a little bit slower on systems that don't. But they haven't made any announcements about that. They could do that. I just am thinking, if you've got a Mac with 8 gigs of RAM, most of the stuff is going to work. I just, knowing now that RAM is a huge constraint for machine learning, my calculus when I'm on the order page is going to change a little bit just because I think Apple Silicon is really good at running well with a smaller amount of memory. But once you throw AI in the mix, it is a different story.
Thank you.
How about power consumption? Because AI is pretty processor intensive, right?
It can be, but the Apple Silicon chips, and this is one of the reasons, they have the neural engine, which is custom designed to handle these kinds of tasks. And anytime you've got a chip that has custom blocks in it, what that means is that it doesn't have to do, churn inefficiently. I mean, because like software could do anything, but it's not necessarily efficient. So like you can encode video on the CPU and it'll be okay, but they built a video encoder into the chip that is incredibly efficient because that's all it does. Having the neural engine is kind of like that. So it is using your energy instead of the energy in a data center somewhere. That's true, but I don't think it's going to be the case where it's going to make people's iPhones burst into flames or anything like that, or kill the battery, because Apple has sort of designed the hardware to work with this stuff.
David.
Yeah. While we're on neural engine, another, I think, relatively quick question. I understand that other people or other companies like Microsoft, et cetera, are designing chips with the equivalent of neural engines on them. They're, I guess, pretty far down the line as far as Taiwan Semiconductor is concerned versus Apple's. But do Apple, when you go from an M1 to an M4 chip, and they still say 9 neural engines or whatever, does that mean that I know they're making the chip more compact by using smaller wiring, but does that mean that they don't redesign those neural engines, or are they going to redesign neural engines and put more of them on in the near future devices?
I mean, they may put more cores on at some point, but they do redesign it. In fact, I think the neural engine I think there was a next generation neural engine in the M2. They don't talk about it a lot, but if you go back even to the M2, they said it was a next generation neural engine. So they become more efficient regardless of how many cores there are.
Yeah.
But that said, I'm sure their priorities have changed a little bit since this AI stuff has come on, and that you will see future chips have more of that. But they do keep updating it, and the number of cores is not the only measure, right? It's the efficiency. Sure. And with Apple Silicon, they tend to update different parts of the chip. We think of the chip as a monolith, but it's not. It's a bunch of little blocks. So like the one year they may update the graphics processing unit, and another year they might update the CPU cores, and another time they might update the neural engine, and they do that. They vary that from generation to generation. But I mean, neural engine's been around 7 years, so there have been many iterations over that period. I don't know how many generations, but lots of them. And they keep doing it.
That's useful to know. My other question is, and I think it's sort of an elephant in the room, about the European Union. I think they're going to Bigfoot even Apple on all of this Apple exclusive, this Apple only that stuff. Do you get any reading at all as to just how vulnerable Apple feels? I know they're delaying some of their software updates in Europe. So are we going to see more and more of this kind of stuff, you figure?
Yeah, I mean, I think Apple is wary. So the first wave of what happened in Europe was existing features that Europe said needed to be changed in order to meet the requirements of the Digital Markets Act, the DMA. The next step is now Apple is shipping or planning to ship new features. And the calculus changes a little bit, because Apple can say, well, we're not sure whether this feature is allowed in Europe or not, so we're just not going to ship it. And so Apple Intelligence and a few other features that I haven't even talked about yet in the operating systems are just not going to ship in Europe, at least at first. Now, part of that is politics. Part of that is Apple saying, no, Europe, passing this law doesn't mean you get more. It also means you get less. Because they've gotten a lot of features that nobody else in the world has. And this is Apple sending the message that that's not, don't get used to it. New features may just not come to your region because they might not be legal. I think it's also an attempt by Apple to get the European regulators to keep in mind that they just announced this stuff a couple weeks ago. So it wasn't public before then. So now there is an opportunity for Apple to have a conversation with the regulators about how these features will work and get a read from them on whether they think that these are going to be, conform to the DMA or be misaligned. And if they conform to the DMA, they may ship in Europe sooner rather than later. If they don't, and they require additional engineering work, probably what's going to happen is Apple's going to say, okay, you're going to have to get to the back of the line. We'll get to them later. So like, for example, there's a feature that's very cool where you can see your iPhone on your Mac and use it. And it looks great. It works really well. And it's integrated with Notification Center, and you can drag and drop files into it. And there are all these things that you can do with it. And Apple's withholding that feature. And I think one of the reasons is they're not clear if Europe and the European Commission that regulates this is going to say, you can't build a feature. Either you can't build a Mac feature that preferences iPhone over Android, or you can't build an iPhone feature that preferences Mac over Windows. Either way, I think Apple's sort of saying, well, what do you think? And that conversation couldn't even happen until 2 weeks ago. So I think it's going to be weird. I think they're going to feel each other out. But I do think that if Apple builds a feature, that Apple is going to build a feature that it thinks is the right feature for the world. And if Europe is out of step with that, and it's going to require more engineering work, I think what will happen is that Europe will get that stuff later, if at all. And then they'll just keep moving on. So for now, what they're saying is when Apple Intelligence and some of these other features ship this fall, for us, they won't be turned on in the EU. It's not that they will not offer the updates. It's just that those features will be turned on. They'll be locked out in the EU. They just won't work.
Cool. Okay, thank you.
Anything else?
I don't see any other hands.
Okay. I will talk about other stuff then. So I mentioned ChatGPT. I should at least mention this. It's interesting. They did integrate ChatGPT, but in a very weird way. As I mentioned, it very much at arm's length. It's turned off by default. The first time you get to that point where it would have said, I found this thing on the web for you, it will instead say, oh, ChatGPT might be able to answer this question. Do you want me to use it? You have to say yes. And then every time there's a possibility after that of something going to ChatGPT, which is outside of Apple's scope, it will ask before it sends it there. And then what gets returned has a warning label on it at the bottom that says this might not be real, so check it if it's important. So what a great relationship for them to have. However, and they say that they're going to have other partners. It's not just going to be ChatGPT, so it'll be more like a search engine where there will be multiple ones. They also talked up the idea that in the long run, there may be a lot of sort of targeted chatbots that are like trained on very specific technical things like a medical or a legal, where you might actually want to slot that in down the road. So even when they say we integrated ChatGPT, it's not an exclusive. They don't plan on it being an exclusive. They're going to give you all the warning labels, but it does mean that you've got that outlet. Another interesting thing that I don't think came out as clearly is a couple of things going on. First off, when your request goes to ChatGPT, it's anonymized. It's actually put through a relay server that is not controlled by Apple. It's a little like the private relay stuff that Apple did. And that means ChatGPT doesn't know what your IP address is. They don't know who you are. They don't have a history for you. They don't know who you are. And contractually, according to Apple, they're not allowed to retain any of your data. So, which is not the case for just going to chatgpt.com and typing things in. So Apple has actually brokered a deal with them where they've gotten even ChatGPT to offer a level of privacy beyond what they normally do. But you're still sending things to a ChatGPT server, and you got to be aware of that. So it's interesting. Oh, and it's free. It's free, even though ChatGPT costs. It's free. This whole function. If you do pay for ChatGPT, you can log in and get extra features and all of that, but the base is free. So that's it, though. Everything else I talked about before that, before I took questions, that's Apple Intelligence. ChatGPT not involved at all. Just Apple's models. ChatGPT is like a fallback. And then I think there are a couple other places where they'll offer to like ask ChatGPT to write you an email or write you an essay or something like that. But again, it's a very clear kind of like you can go over there and use ChatGPT. It's more like a convenience to integrate it, so you don't have to get your web browser out and go to chatgpt.com. You can just do it in line, but it's totally separate from all the other stuff Apple's doing. Okay, I'm gonna barrel through a bunch of new OS features and then we can have questions. Vision OS only came out 4 months ago, so not a huge update, but there's some nice things in there. They have an amazing feature using machine learning that takes 2D pictures and makes them look 3D, and it works great. I have no complaints. It's really quite amazing. It actually made me say, why do we even try to take 3D images? Because you can just fake it and then they look perfect. They're experimenting with new gestures in Vision OS. There's a gesture where you look at your hand and then you can tap to open the home screen, or you look at your hand and then you turn it over like you're checking your watch, and the time and battery and control center kind of come up. Very clever. There's support for train mode. So if you're riding on BART, I guess you could, okay, Amtrak, you could do that. There's a beach environment that is really beautiful, and I don't want to work in because I don't want to make my brain think that work happens at the beach. And the Vision Pro is getting the Passwords app, which is also available on the Mac and the iPad and the iPhone and on Windows. So there's a proper app in front of Apple's password database, which was already there, and it's in settings and it works great. But they made it a standalone app with some nice interface and filters and stuff. iPhone specific stuff. Some of this will roll to iPad as well. Free placement of app icons on the app screens. You can drag them to the bottom, and you don't need to have them all there. You can just drag them down to the bottom or to the side, and you can just put them wherever. Android's been able to do that forever. They should have been able to do that forever, but they finally did it. Icons can change in dark mode. There's the ability to tint your icons with color, so it's just more customization. Control Center is getting multiple pages, which is really clever. And then even more than that, third-party apps can be in Control Center. So if you've got an app for a smart home thing or a car or whatever else, you can put it in Control Center. It's all customizable. You can move the items around in Control Center. And the thing that I thought was very clever is it's multi-page Control Center, but if you don't have to like swipe down with Control Center and then swipe up to get to the pages. You can actually start your swipe down and then just keep slowly swiping, and it will keep swiping through the pages till you find what you want. It's a very nice little gesture feature, and I think that third-party apps in Control Center is going to be great. They're like little teeny tiny widgets, but I like it. I think it's a good idea. The 2 items on your lock screen, the camera and the flashlight, are going to be customizable. You can set them to other things that are useful, including things from apps. And this is even more clever. It's per lock screen. So if you have a different lock screen that you use sometimes or in a different mode, it can have different buttons on that lock screen than on the other one. So you can have every lock screen have a different set of buttons down there if you want. Very clever. I like it. You can now lock an app. So you can mark an app as locked, and if anybody you hand your phone to wants to open that app, they're going to have to authenticate, which currently, once it's unlocked and you hand it to somebody, everything goes. You can also hide apps. If you don't want somebody seeing that you have a particular app for whatever reason, you can hide it, and you have to authenticate to see that app exists and then to launch it. You can do in messages, you can tap back with any emoji. That should have happened years ago too, but it's finally happening. You can schedule messages to be sent later. So if you don't want to wake somebody up, or you want to remind somebody, you want to say happy birthday, but you want to do it now when you remember it's their birthday tomorrow and not forget tomorrow, you can set it to send tomorrow and it will send tomorrow, which is really clever. You can format text in messages, and you can italicize a word. You can make a little effect on a word or a couple of words. You can do all of that stuff. It's just a huge improvements to messages. And you can send messages via satellite if you are out of cellular range and have one of the phones that supports the emergency satellite feature. You will now be able to send non-emergency texts via satellite, which is pretty cool. Mail will automatically categorize your incoming mail based on analysis, machine learning analysis, but this isn't Apple Intelligence, so everybody gets it. There's also a cool digest view. If you're looking for that particular message from your airline, you will get a view that shows like all the mail from that airline, and then you can find it. It's doing some smart grouping of all the messages from a particular business. And they added on maps and this is on Mac and iPad as well, topographic and trail maps for hiking, which didn't previously exist, which is great. And they redesigned the Photos app. I write a book about the Photos app. I'm going to have to rewrite that entire book this summer. What they decided to do is make it a single pane instead of having a bunch of tabs along the bottom. And here's the reason. I think people don't use the tabs. And the problem is there are two different ways to use the Photos app. One is see the grid of photos that you've taken and find a photo. And the other is, hey, remember 8 years ago, this amazing picture or this trip you took? Let's remind you of that, because why did you take all these pictures if you're not going to look at them? That used to be on a different tab. Now they sort of share space in the opening, and you can sort of scroll down and just get your grid, or you can scroll up and see a bunch of things that Apple's machine learning technology, there's that word again, has pulled out of your photo library, but it's all kind of more in your face than it used to be. And it's very customizable, and they've done some new analysis of your locations of your photos in order to build this trips section where it's trying to intelligently guess like when did you take a trip, and that goes back years. I was able to pull out trips from like 10 years ago that it pulled out, and look at pictures from then, which was pretty great. So that is across iPhone, iPad, Mac, new Photos app. Big feature on the Mac is iPhone mirroring, which I mentioned earlier, not in the EU. So your iPhone is locked, and on your Mac, you can open your iPhone. There's actually an app called iPhone mirroring. And while your phone is sitting locked, your phone screen comes up on your Mac, and you can click. And if there's like a notification from your phone and you click on it, it'll launch that app. It is really smart and clever, and I think people are going to really like it. So instead of having to go get your phone and unlock it and do all those things in order to check on an app, or there's an app that you can't use on your Mac and you have to go get your phone to do it. Like it actually happens for me where my Roomba starts up and I don't want it to go because I'm in the middle of something and I don't want it to make some noise. I have to go get my phone, open the Roomba app, and say stop. And with this, I wouldn't have to do that because I can just bring up my phone on my Mac and go stop, and that's it. It does it. It'll also work with standby. So if you've got your phone on a little stand sideways showing the time or whatever, it'll still do that while you're using it and seeing the full interface on your Mac. Also very clever. It includes audio, and it's a high frame rate. They actually showed me playing a game on it, and it looked great. So they're doing some amazing, clever stuff there. Your phone needs to be within Bluetooth range to make the initial connection, and then I think it streams via Wi-Fi direct between the two devices. So you can't, just being on your Wi-Fi network at home is not enough, but it needs to be close enough to see, so like 30 feet maybe, to see it via Bluetooth to make the initial connection. Also, a bunch of new tiling features. So if you drag windows to the sides of the screen, something the Windows operating system has done for a long time, it'll generate it'll make your window half size on the right side or in the quarter size in the corner. And there's a bunch of keyboard shortcuts and other things. So better kind of window organizational features built into the operating system. There have been utilities that have been able to do that for a long time, but what if it was built in? That's going to happen in macOS Sequoia. There's a new presenter preview in the video settings so that you can, if you're giving a presentation like this one, but have slides, you can see what's coming before you say next slide, which it doesn't currently do for the video versions. And they're also going to use their magic to erase your background and replace it with an image that'll be available in any app, because Apple will do it. And I bet Apple will do a better job of it than most other apps do as well. And there's a bunch of changes to Safari in terms of reader mode will offer a summary of the article in addition to showing you the article itself. So you can use a machine learning built summary. In iPad, there's a new tab bar interface for a lot of apps. So instead of having a sidebar, by default, the sidebar is gone, but there's tabs along the top. But it's customizable. You can choose what's in the tabs, and if you open it up, then the sidebar comes back. So it's sort of a new approach to iPad app interfaces. There is a new look for any iPad app that uses the file browser. I don't know if those of you who have used file browser apps on the iPad know what I'm talking about here. If you open like Pages on the iPad, it feels very much like you've opened files. If you open Keynote on the iPad, if you open Numbers on the iPad, they all feel like you just opened files because they're showing the file browser. I think Apple got the feedback that it got really confusing. Like literally, did I just open files by mistake? I thought I was opening Pages. And so they've redesigned it. So there's like a big thing at the top that says you're in Pages now, so that you don't get confused about it. And it looks nicer. So they did that for iPad apps. And a big feature, you may have seen it, called Math Notes, as well as a Smart Script. These are features for Apple Pencil and iPad where you can it'll refine your handwriting as you write. If you make a mistake in handwritten text, you can delete it and rewrite it. You can copy and paste it as plain text. You can paste plain text into your handwriting in a notes document, and it will appear in something that looks a lot like your handwriting because it's learning what your handwriting looks like as you go. And the Math Notes feature, which is in Notes and the new Calculator app for iPad, if you write a math equation and put the equals, it will calculate it and give you the answer in a thing that looks like your own handwriting. It's kind of like magic. It's very impressive. And math is one of those things that it's actually hard to type. You can type it in Notes. You can just do math problems in Notes and it'll work. But a lot with a big, like, you've got fractions and you've got big parentheses and all sorts of other things that are not easy to, there are ways to do it, but it's not easy to do that on a keyboard. But you can do it with an Apple Pencil and it's pretty straightforward. I think that's going to be a big one for students, especially. And let's see what else really quickly. tvOS has got a new view in the TV app that will show you like Prime Video does, who is that actor, and then you can click and say like what else, where do I know them from? That feature is coming to the TV app. And for a lot of us who struggle with what did that person just say, they have this thing called Dialogue Enhancer that they used on like HomePods before on the Apple TV, but it's coming to more speaker types. And the idea there is you turn on Dialogue Enhancer and it makes the dialogue clearer. So you can understand what they're saying, which is really good. Also, if you hit the back button, it turns on the captions temporarily when you hit the back button. So if you back up to see what is going on and what that person said, it will actually turn on captions temporarily, show you what they said, and then continue on and turn it back off. Just super smart little features for that. And then finally, Apple Watch, actually Stealth got a kind of a great update. There's a new training mode. You can pause your rings if you're going to take a rest day. There's a Vitals app. If you wear your watch overnight, it will, they say that it's a perfect time for them to monitor your vitals and then tell you about any changes over time. So it works with your overnight data. There's a pregnancy data addition to the cycle tracking that they were doing before. The smart stack that they added last time on the Apple Watch, where you scroll down and you get the little widgets. Live activities from your phone go in there now automatically, which is great. It dynamically adds widgets there when you need them based on its own knowledge. It's very clever. So that stack has gotten a lot better. There's a translate app on the Apple Watch now. So you can actually, if you're struggling to have a conversation with somebody using another language, there will be a translate app on the watch that's already on the phone, right? It'll be on the watch that'll allow you to say something, have it translate, and have the watch say it out loud, and also hear what they say and translate it back into your language of choice. Very clever. The double tap feature, again, that they added last year, where you can kind of go like this, that was limited on the Series 9 and the Ultra 2. That was limited to Apple. Only Apple stuff could use it. And in the next watchOS, third-party apps will be able to use it and define what happens when you double tap in that app. So my podcast app, which is not Apple Podcasts, will be able to, like pause when I do that. It's good. It's a good little thing. And there's a new photos face that uses machine learning to identify the subject of the photo that's going to go on your watch face so that it doesn't put the time right over their face, but instead will put it on a less prominent part of the photo so you can see the time and the photo that you wanted to see, which again, like they probably should have done that a while ago, but I'm very glad they did it. It's very smart for them to do that. And my final one, and then I'll open it up to all questions, is AirPods are getting a new feature where if you're talking to Siri, or if Siri has alerted you about an incoming like message and is asking you if you want it or not, and you're not in a place where you're comfortable, suddenly saying something out loud, we've all been there, you can actually nod or shake your head and Siri knows what you mean. I just think it's using the motion detectors in the AirPods to do that. It's super clever. I think that's a very funny feature, because there's lots of times where I think they're going to think I'm a crazy person if I suddenly say yes in the middle of like, so now you can just go like this and keep it subtle. They might not think you're a crazy person, or they might anyway. Anyway, that is a fast zip through all the non-Apple Intelligence features that got announced. The usual thing, it'll be out. These will all be out this fall. And some of these features will probably not make it in September or October, and will have to be December or March or May, because that happens sometimes. But if there's anything you're interested in there or anything else, I'm all yours. Happy to answer any questions.
You can probably tell which features aren't going to make it because they're not even in the beta now.
Yeah, I mean, some of them will get added over time. But my tip is, if you're excited about something, find it on Apple's webpage and see what footnote is next to it and read that footnote, because those footnotes are usually where they say coming next year. They're like, you could do this amazing thing. Coming later this year means like winter, means like December. So that's a good way to decode what Apple means by the announcements that they make.
So you think they Sherlock some stuff like Grammarly with this?
It'll be harder for Grammarly because it's built in. Remains to see how good it is, but because the new Grammarly AI feature is amazingly good. Like I felt like I was
getting better and better,
like a copy editor. But if they can do that and build it into everything, that's amazing. So yeah, and like I said, there's so many window tiling utilities for the Mac,
yeah.
But here's the truth about Sherlocking, right? Sherlocking is the concept that Apple builds a feature in, and all the apps that used to do that are dead because Apple built it into the operating system. The truth is, the reason there are all those apps is because it's something Apple should build into the operating system. And the truth is, when Apple builds it, they're building it for 90% of the users. And those apps will continue to be successful because they will build for the other 10% that want more than the general version, the basic version that Apple builds. So it's never quite the tragedy that it sometimes seems that it is.
But people here don't even remember what the word Sherlock was.
Yeah, there was an app from a guy in Alameda called Watson, and Apple introduced an app called Sherlock that did the same thing and killed Watson. That was rough. He's fine. Dan Wood. I ran into him at a concert the other week.
The other one I was thinking of was the topo maps and all trails.
Oh yeah. I mean, my friend David Smith, who does Pedometer Plus, he's got that feature too. But again, either, if your feature is so basic that it's just filling a basic need that Apple could very easily put in a software update, then you're gonna be replaced. And I mean, I don't know what to say, but in most cases, they're not basic. In most cases, they're serving very particular needs that Apple's not going to serve, and they'll continue on. That's life. That's life. Apple could swoop in and replace your product in a heartbeat, and sometimes it happens.
Okay, who we got? Anybody else fights Kenji? Anybody else get a chance? Okay, go for it, Kenji.
Yeah, it sounds like these features will coming out over the next year will take about 5 years to learn. And it'll still miss most of them.
Well, once Siri has read all the documentation, you can just ask it, right? That they can help.
I'm gonna love that feature. People email me all the time. How do I do this very simple thing? I go to Google, I Google it, find the Apple, copy and paste it, and send it back to them. They say, "Oh, thank you very much."
Yeah, I didn't even mention, in addition to the iPhone sharing on the Mac, you're going to be able to share your screen on an iPhone or an iPad. And that means that you'll be able to see and help somebody remotely who's having trouble with their iPhone, and even like circle things and be like, click this thing over here. And it will be great for supporting
Like Apple
other
Support
users.
does now.
Yeah. Yeah. You'll be able to do that. You basically in an iMessage and you'll say, which you can do on the Mac right now and say share your screen, but you'll be able to do that on iPhone and iPad too.
Do you have any prognostications about coming hardware? One thing I'm wondering about is iPad mini.
Mark Gurman at Bloomberg says iPad mini is sort of late this year or early next year. It's obviously on a longer cycle. I'm sure they'll get there. I think they'll question with a lot of Apple's lower end devices, and the mini's not quite low end, but here's the thing. I think Apple doesn't want to ship anything new that doesn't support Apple Intelligence.
Oh, no way.
And for some of the cheaper products, that's going to be like, if it's too expensive to do it today, they may just wait. And so like the iPad mini is a good example where it probably needs an M1 or an M2. And do they want to do that? And when, can they do, what price would it be? And do they want to do that this fall, or do they want to wait until next spring to do it? All the Macs are going to get updated to M4, but that's going to start this fall and probably take a year. So, and yeah, mini's just hanging out there, but I feel like, yeah, iPad mini is this fall or next spring. It's I'm sure they will do an update, but, I don't think we've got a lot of clarity, and it's not coming, too soon. I think the next big hardware release will be like MacBook Pros. I mean, the iPhone in September, obviously, and then MacBook Pros in probably in like October.
Do you think my M1 Studio is going to stay relevant?
Oh,
Sure.
Long time.
It's great. I mean, I mean, eventually all computers get old, but like the M1 Studio, especially, so you've got the faster processors, still pretty great. I am coming to you from an M1 Mac Studio right now, and it's still pretty great. And maybe I'll get the M4 when it comes out next year, but maybe not. I don't know. I think Apple drawing the line for Mac users at M1 instead of later is good for everybody who's got one of those M1s. That they'll still be relevant.
Cool.
What do you think about the HomePod? I mean, that seems like an obvious place for some intelligence, but you'd have to be a major upgrade in the hardware.
I can't wait. I think it's not a priority for them right now, but I can't wait for the answer. I think there are two big options, and one is they currently have this thing called personal requests, which basically goes back to your iPhone. So one option they have is to just sort of say, when you've got an iPhone capable of Apple Intelligence, the HomePod will defer to the iPhone or will channel the iPhone.
Yeah.
That is one possibility. I think in the long run, if they want to keep making HomePods, they're going to either have to do that, or they're going to have to. I mean, I don't think they're going to put 8 gigs of RAM into a HomePod, probably, but they might need to build that into their cloud, right? And the problem there is that one of the big things about their cloud is context of the user, and it doesn't know it. Your HomePod knows very little about you, other than your music library, which can be useful. So yeah, do they build that as a cloud thing, or do they just kind of like kick it back to another device in your house that knows more about you and has more processor power in that moment? And it's a good question. And honestly, I don't think, I'm sure somebody at Apple is thinking about it, but it's not the priority right now. iPhone, iPad, and Mac are the priority.
Or the watch, is that's the one that needs the most intelligence. Can they channel that back to your phone? It's tethered to your phone. It has to have a phone.
I think that the watch is the same story, is that eventually it will basically either tether to the iPhone and use it for that intelligence, or it will use the cloud, depending on the scenario. But again, I think that it's just like they are doing this all very quickly, and some stuff is going to have to wait. And I think that the phone, or the watch and HomePods and Apple TV and the Vision Pro even are like, not yet.
Yeah, I get frustrated with the Apple TV. Is like, I'm afraid to get another one. I wish it had a migration assistant. It's like getting a new one is like a nightmare.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree.
David has his hand up again. You're muted, David. There you go.
Going a little off topic from what you were
That's fine.
commenting on, Jason, but a while back, I think it's called passkey, the kind of public key, private key kind of thing that allows you, in theory, to not have to put in passwords all the time. Do you ever hear anything from Apple on what they're doing about that and how whether they're going to implement that through keychain and all that stuff or not? I realize it's not really Apple's. I mean, the site has to offer it first, but
Right.
what are you hearing in that area?
Apple implemented passkeys in the shipping version of Mac OS last fall and
Okay.
iOS and iPad OS. So passkey support's already there. The passkeys will automatically be brought into your password manager of choice, including the one that's built in that Apple offers.
Okay.
And beyond that, it's just up to the sites, but those are growing and it's coming. So yeah, passkeys is happening. I signed in with a passkey somewhere just the other day. It takes everybody, right? And it's not just Apple, right? Like you said, Google is on board with it. Microsoft's on board with it. Everybody, the idea of moving away from passwords to a cryptographically approved way of showing who you are, everybody wants to do that because it means that the websites don't need to store your password, which means that if they get hacked, there's no password to be stolen.
Exactly.
They like that a lot. So they're motivated to get out of the password business. And that's why there's a lot of login via email these days, is because if you log in via email, they don't have to store your password and they don't want it. They don't want the password. So passkeys are they're in there and they'll just, I think the issue is just to get more widespread understanding among users and support from apps and websites.
Thank you.
But they're great. If you ever get offered the opportunity to make a passkey for a website, try it. You might like it because you end up in a situation where you get to that website and you click login and it says, oh, give me your fingerprint for Touch ID, or it scans your face and it says, great, you're logged in. And that's it. That's it. Because what's really happened is you've exchanged a cryptographic key with the server and it verifies that it's you and it moves on and you don't have to enter in a password. It's great.
Are you saying that that any place you log in right now with your thumbprint is a variant of passkey?
Yeah.
No, although some of them may be. I mean, if you go to a website and you set up a passkey, the way it works is it says use your Touch ID or Face ID to log in, and the passkey is passed.
Offering that, but if you just do it through keychain, basically, your device, Apple device, knows where that passkey is stored in, or password.
It's in iCloud Keychain.
It's different. It's a different thing. Okay.
Right. So it's in iCloud Keychain. It's very similar to what Apple does when you try to log onto an Apple site and it asks you for your fingerprint, but that's an Apple specific thing. But it's the same idea, which is the site says, hey, I think you have a passkey. Your device looks at its keychain, basically, and says, oh, I do have one. And then you authenticate in order to say, yes, I do want to log in here. And it knows that then it's like, oh, great, it's you. And then you're in and that's it. It's like, that's the dream. The dream is, especially if you're on a system with Face ID, the dream is basically you say, I would like to log into Amazon.com and you're logged in and that's it. And you never have to do anything more because it's biometrically authenticating you.
But if you already have a password on a site and then it offers you to do a passkey, it still has you can still log in with your password and they still have it and it can still get stolen.
Yeah, it's a transitional process. In the long run, they won't keep your password. In the long run, you'll have to do an email reset. But right now, nobody wants to, right? So first is you launch passkeys and you build passkeys in, and then later you get rid of passwords. But we're not in that
doing
point now.
They're not to the
We're not
point
in
where they
that point now.
offer to, they don't allow you to remove your password once you made a passkey.
No,
Nobody
I don't
does.
think so. But
I've never seen that.
it's inevitable that we will get there, but they're not willing to do that yet because not everybody's device has a passkey, and but they'll get there.
Yeah,
Good.
pretty much any desktop Mac, unless you have a studio display, you don't have Face ID.
That's there's no Face ID on the Mac. It's just Touch ID. But if you're
Right.
but remember, 3/4 of the Macs in use are laptops, and most of those now have Touch ID on them. And if you are using a desktop Mac and you bought the Touch ID keyboard, you have Touch ID as well. So there are lots of Macs that have Touch ID available. The other way passkey works is you would put in your device passcode. So you would put in your Mac password, and that would be the authentication that would then. But instead of it being whatever the website password is, it's your local device
really?
password, and then it sends the passkey.
So you can authenticate with your admin password instead of Face ID?
Well, you're supposed to be able to, although it varies. Actually, one of the things that happens that's a problem with passkeys right now is that a lot of times what they want you to do is get your phone and then authenticate on your phone, and then your phone sends a Bluetooth message to your Mac and authenticates that way. So it's early days. They're putting it together. They're very smart people working on this so that we don't have to have passwords anymore, but we're not quite there yet.
Okay,
but Apple's
let's
on
give
it.
somebody else have a chance that hasn't asked a question. There's plenty of people here. We have
I'll take
I have a
anything.
question.
Jennifer's
32
hand is
people
up.
still here.
Go ahead, Jennifer.
I have become subscriber to Apple News, and I'm an addict with Quartiles, the game.
Okay.
And I play it on my iPhone, and I can't get it on the iPad when I flip it open. Is that a glitch? It just started. This Quartiles game.
That sounds like a bug.
I think so. Okay.
I don't.
Leave it to me to find a bug.
Yeah.
Are you on an older version of iPad OS? Is it not new?
No, it's my iPad. It's everything I have is pretty up to date. I play it all on my phone.
Yeah.
It's just a
You
game
definitely
where
have
you
the
have
latest. You have to have the
letters and
latest iPad OS, right? You know that?
yeah, it just doesn't.
Okay.
It doesn't.
Okay.
I have to go back and start. It doesn't transfer. That's all.
All right.
I think it's a bug.
It could be. It could be.
Would you tell Apple about it, please?
I will see if I can nail that one down and reproduce it. If I can reproduce
Thank
it,
you.
I will file a feedback. I am going to give a plug to my friend Lex Friedman. It's just a dad in New Jersey, suburban dad. He wrote his own app. He built his own website. It's lex.games, lex.games, lex.games.
Okay.
There's an iPad app, an iPhone app. It's the same. He wrote it, and there's a website, and there's a bunch of games, and there's a subscription, but also there's a bunch of stuff that's free, and it's fun, and it's my friend Lex. So if you want to do more puzzles, Lex.games.
No, this is a word game. A letters.
He's got lots of them. He's got lots of games. There's like 8 different games.
Well, it's free.
He's like his own little New York Times, except it's just
Okay.
Lex.
This is free free if you subscribe to the Apple News.
Oh yeah, I know. The Apple News has added a bunch of puzzles. They're great.
Yeah.
There's a crossword, and it's
Thank you.
Apple sees value in that. So does the New York Times. So does Lex. I guess my friend Lex. He started making puzzles and he couldn't stop, and then he wrote
What's
an
the
app.
name again?
Lex, Lex.games.
Okay,
Check
thank you.
it out.
I
This is
will.
my friend Lex.
I will.
Very nice.
Scott, we got a new player.
All right.
Yes. So
Scott.
I have can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yeah, video's
So I
off,
have
but we can hear you.
an iPad that I've been using for about the last 5 or 6 years.
Okay.
I'm out of memory. I haven't been able to update it now in a couple months. I need a new iPad. I'm thinking I'll run it for maybe another 5 or 6 years, whatever. And now I wasn't going to go the M chip route, but now I'm thinking it might be worthwhile just to be able to have the Apple Intelligence options available for me with an M chip. What would your suggestion be?
Yeah, I think so. I think an iPad Air would be a good idea. I'll also say, so the iPad Air, I think, is M2 now, and then there's the M4 iPad Pro. Keep in mind also, and this is a tip for everybody, Apple has its own refurbished store where you can get slightly older models or even current models that have basically been returned by somebody, so they're not new, so they can't sell them as new, for deals. You could also look elsewhere where there's used things for sale, because you could get like an M1 iPad Air for probably a lot cheaper, and it's going to give you a much better experience than like a base model iPad that's not on an M chip.
Oh, interesting.
So
Okay.
you don't necessarily, I mean, if you want it to last 5 years, I would say look at the M2, the current M2 Air, because I think that's a good combination of power and value. You don't need to go up to the iPad Pro. If you want to keep it for that long, refurbs are nice, but it means you're starting from last year's model instead of this year's
Yeah.
model. So if you're trying to run the distance, you might want to get this year's model. And those just came out. They're M2. They're going to get all these Apple Intelligence features, and they're really nice. They're really nice iPads. The new iPad Air is really good.
Great. Thank you.
I found the Amazon has a iPad refurb store, and I think it might even be Apple powered.
Yeah. Apple and Amazon have like a deal now.
Yeah,
where
I
they
was
do
surprised. And they have a
They do all
bigger
that thing.
selection than the Apple website. They had a lot of stuff.
But you can, for current models, even you can get refurb deals, and sometimes they're very good, and they come with a warranty because they're certified refurbished. And the truth is, if you get it and it's not any good, you just send it back and get your money back. That's also part of the deal. But if you're looking for a bargain, the Apple refurb site is nice. But if you're looking for something to last 4 or 5 years, maybe maybe spring for that iPad Air.
Thank you.
That Amazon Renewed store, they everything has a 90-day. You can't get you can't get Apple Care on it, but you have a full 90-day return policy. Yeah. And on what they call Renewed Premium, which is certain items are marked Renewed Premium, you get a 1-year return policy, which is pretty generous.
It's good because I have had at least 2 products that I bought from the Amazon Renewed store that were broken.
Really?
Where I think it's very clear that somebody bought it and it didn't work, and they returned it to Amazon, and Amazon just said, okay, we'll sell it to some other sucker now. But yeah, it was a free return, so I just was disappointed.
Yeah.
Can I ask you a question about the Apple Intelligence, the connection with ChatGPT? What is in it for OpenAI if they can't use it for training and they're not getting paid for it? What's in it for them?
So it's the same thing that's in it for Google, in a way, to be the default search engine, which they pay Apple like $7 billion a year to do, which is, think of it this way. There are only 2 smartphone operating systems. So half of the United States is an Apple customer using an iPhone. And it's a good, demographically, it's better than that. Like it is more than half the United States, and they tend to be richer than the Android users. They spend more money on stuff. So incredibly valuable market, and Apple controls it. So if you're ChatGPT, what you get out of it is access to those people, because it's built into the operating system, and you're a preferred partner, even if you're not ultimately the only partner. And you find a way to make money from that. And is that through? Probably it's through offering some premium features that you subscribe to, and then Apple takes their 30% of the subscription, and ChatGPT, OpenAI gets 70%. Or maybe they, find a way to make money like Google has done with advertising in results. I don't know. That's the mystery of it. But the impulse is Apple is the gatekeeper. Apple controls a very valuable set of customers. And also think about this. What's the other major competitor really right now to OpenAI? It's Google. So Android's not going to be where you find it. Google might be open and let you right, but let's be serious here. Google is going to integrate Google's AI throughout Android. So if you're OpenAI, you've got your Microsoft partnership. That's great. But that does not help you with mobile devices, which is really the most important category. in terms of volume. So you make a deal with Apple and you give them it for free, and you promise not to track, and because you gotta make a deal with Apple, right? Because you can't make a deal with Google, not really. So I think that's the motivation going on there. Whether it, and again, it's such arm's length, like whether it will work for them or not, I don't know. Who knows? But I think it benefits Apple to be in business with the currently considered the leading chatbot, even if it is at arm's length. And I think it's great for OpenAI to have access to Apple's customers. So right now, in the long run, I think money's going to need to change hands, and it's not going to be Apple who's paying. But in the short run, I think this is a deal that works for it, because it sounds like there's no money changing hands at all. That's the report. But the idea is that over time they would sell subscriptions to extra features, and Apple would take a cut, and isn't everybody happy? We'll see if that works or not.
Let's see, anybody else got a chance to ask a question besides David?
Jan, go ahead.
Jan's got a hand up.
Jan, go Jan.
Okay. I feel like there's a conspiracy to keep me from having apps on the computer, that everything says download our app here, and it's always for the phone.
Yeah.
Is there something that's trying to get us all to use the phone instead of the computer?
The truth is it's just volume. There are so many people, like everybody has a phone, and not everybody has, and it's with them all the time. And that's not the true with computers. And with younger people, sometimes they don't have a personal computer at all, and they live on their phones. And then the other thing is, if you're the developer of whatever, and you need to write an app, if you write an app for iPhone and Android, you got the world. And then and then many of them don't even worry about Mac and Windows. I have found that it's nice, since having an Apple Silicon Mac, there are a lot of iPad apps that I can run that were never really meant to run on the Mac, but they run. And honestly, this is one of the reasons Apple built that iPhone sharing feature into Sequoia that's coming this fall, is it means you can get to those apps that don't run on your Mac. And I mean, you still have to have an iPhone. It still has to have that app on it, but at least it lets you kind of use it in one place. So, but I think the reason is it's more efficient for companies to write phone apps because they figure everybody's got a phone. It annoys me too, but I get it.
But to me, everything is easier to do on the computer. I mean, writing an email, everything is easier.
I know. I agree. I agree with you.
Okay.
Anybody else besides David? Go for it, David.
Okay, David.
The questioner of last resort. Okay. I keep hearing the different opinions, and I'm looking for somebody maybe knows. Does Apple actually have a very large server somewhere that's capable of crunching as many tokens, or close to as many tokens, as ChatGPT and Llama and some of the other really large generative AI type devices?
Yeah, I mean, Apple. So this is for training. You train the model.
Training. Right.
My understanding is that Apple uses a lot of different servers for that. I think they're using Google primarily for that.
Okay.
But they can use Google servers, they can use Amazon servers, they can use Microsoft servers.
They don't have to build their own.
Exactly. So they're using resources, and they're probably spending a lot of money. Maybe they're refunding some of that money Google spends on Safari.
That's
and
right.
Giving it right back to them to do training on the models. But yeah.
Thank you.
So Tim put a question in the chat. It says, years ago, you could mirror your iPhone and change the appearance order of your apps on the home screen. Will the new mirroring permit this once again?
Yes. Yes, that was not really mirroring. It was like it showed you what your screen would look like and you could move things around. This is actually like they wiggle, you drag them around. It's the whole thing. It is your iPhone. I got it working earlier today, and it is exactly what you would expect, which is it's your iPhone in a window on your Mac, which is it's a little weird, but it's not bad.
Does it work with the iPad?
No,
Only iPhone. It's
Only
named
iPhone.
iPhone.
Yep. For now, I think they figure. I mean, honestly, your iPad, those apps. First off, they should probably run on your Mac, even though they maybe don't.
Yeah.
And then
Except
then
for the
it's
new
also a nice big
calculator.
screen.
The new calculator only runs on the iPad, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. It's already a calculator on Mac. All right, I think that's
all right, Jason. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for coming this afternoon.
All righty.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks.
I mean,
Bye, everybody.
we can have you every time. Look at all these people that came in here. They're tripping over themselves.
Yeah, I do it every time, but I'm sure I'll be back.
Yeah,
This is my first time. Won't be my
Thank
last.
you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Jason.
Okay, so we'll end the public recording. That's the end of Jason's presentation, and then we'll have general Q&A. And DVMUG members who find this on YouTube can get the link to the next session of Q&A and the social hour on the DVMUG BBS. So see y'all later.